other side, and I'll never know. But that's fine. We're live now. We're hanging out with Modest Bukowski, showing us the clock. He's got places to go. So do we, Josh. I mean, it's not like we just sit around waiting to stream. We've got stuff to do.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. What were we talking about? We were talking about advertising, real technical conversation before we got going here. And suddenly I looked up and it was 8:08. So, all right, well, let's do a proper start here then. Let's do it.
Over to you, Josh.
All right. Hail cheaters. Welcome to the Always Cheating podcast. My name is Josh. I'm here with Brandon. Brandon, how are you?
I'm great, Josh. It's Gameweek 1 deadline. We've been waiting for this.
Yes.
We're going to reveal our current Gameweek 1 teams. Has anything changed in the last week? Is Dominic Solanke in our teams or not? That's the only reason people are tuning into this episode.
Yeah. Well, so we're going to talk about our team reveals. I'm actually going to do the news update, like what's happening in the Premier League first, because I think if we do the team reveals without doing the news update, it's not going to make a lot of sense because the news has definitely at least changed. I don't know about you, but I mean, I guess we'll see. I actually have not seen your team yet, so I'm excited to see what it looks like. I have been tinkering with it on and off all day, and then just like a half hour ago, I started to think a little bit more about Newcastle, and that like threatened to like pull the thread, that like unspools the whole draft, right? So, but because it actually is.
What do you mean? Like you're getting cold feet about Newcastle assets?
No, well, just more Newcastle defenders, right? Like you could sort of make an argument for Livramento. You can make an argument for Hall. You can make an argument for Burn. But depending on what happens with all of these various dominoes, right? It's like if Trippier leaves, then that makes Livramento great. If Trippier stays, it makes him a trickier asset to have. If Gahey moves to Crystal Palace, does that move Dan Burn back to right back or left back? And if so, does that mean Lewis Hall loses his spot, right?
Yeah.
But if none of these things happen, they're all good 4.5 million assets. And so I'm like, do I want to go into Gameweek 1 with any of these three? Right. Yeah. And I'm that's what I was starting to get cold feet. It's not the like ESOC question really, but this is what happens. I feel like as you get closer to the game week, like Gameweek 1, right, kicks off this Friday. We're 5 days away. It feels like it actually came very quickly, didn't it? Sometimes it feels like the game launch is really early and it's like, by the time like you're just ready for it to start. And now I'm like, wow, it's like, it feels like it's sneaking up on me a little bit. I feel like I said this exact same thing last week, by the way. It's like deja vu.
Time is completely abstract, but there was basically 4 weeks stacked for us to do preseason content, for us to learn about what was happening post Euros in the transfer window. And I guess the Olympics kind of accelerated it too. Like I've been drowning in sports content.
I know. Loving it. Yeah, it's true. We're going right from the Olympics, right? The closing ceremonies on Sunday, right, to Man United hosting Fulham on Friday, which I think is a little bit of a change of pace for the Friday match. I feel like we've typically gotten I feel like it's been like a top, like not often. Well, I guess top 1 or 2 team in terms of where they finished the season before, right? Like last year you had, I think it was Man City went away to Burnley. I think Liverpool the season before that, Arsenal the season before that, Liverpool the season before that. So you have, it's typically been the first or second place finisher that kicks things off. But Man United Fulham is like a kind of, it's an intriguing one.
It's
right?
juicy. It is juicy. Manchester United trying to want to get off on the right foot. Fulham are weirdly like one of the most talked about teams in the preseason, mostly because they're one of the teams that's actually been doing business in the transfer window. And there are a few question marks around Fulham, but I'm excited about some of their assets.
Yeah, and I think that's where I was trying to get to, which is basically you spend the first 2 or 3 weeks and you're like, okay, do I want Salah? Do I want Haaland? Right? It's like the big, or do I want both? Do I want neither one? What do I want to do with Cole Palmer? What do I want to do with X player? Right? And like the sort of like the big players that cost 8.59 million and up, right? And that takes up a lot of energy at the start because in some ways those are the most important questions, right? Those are the players who are going to have the biggest returns, probably the most consistent assets. And then as you get like to this last week, that's when suddenly you start to really think about the 4.5 million type Newcastle defenders. And I think also like, we know that Saka and Odegaard are going to be starters, right? Like, there's no debate there. But as it's the kind of the cheaper ones, the 4.5 million, some of these like 5.5 million midfielders, right? Even someone like Fulham's newest signing, the
Emile Smith Rowe.
Emile Smith Rowe, where it's like probably going to start, right? But like, it's sort of, you need to. I don't think has he still started a match yet? I think he came on in the second half of a match.
He came off he came on for his first match for Fulham, and then over the weekend Fulham beat Hoffenheim 2-0, in which Smith Rowe started and scored another. He scores when he plays. Yeah, it's incredible.
I mean, he was kind of like that with Arsenal too, right? I mean, a couple years ago he had double-digit goals, and he just sort of it was a very competitive left-hand side of the pitch, right? You had 2 years ago Gabriel Martinelli just won the spot. He was so brilliant, right? And then in the last year you had Martinelli and Trossard, right? Both of whom were fantastic. Now sometimes those two played together, but Trossard kind of by the end of the season had sort of won out that spot. Martinelli was fantastic too, and so I just think Smith Rowe was sort of circumstantial. Like, he just really didn't have a spot in that squad because of how much depth they had in the left. Right. I mean, I'm not even sure if Arsenal were looking for a move or if he kind of forced it, right, just to get more match minutes.
Totally. Who knows? Yeah, presumably they would have tried a loan if Arsenal wanted to hang on to him. I think ultimately Arteta's got to make some tough decisions for the budget.
Wow.
And that's
why you don't want to be the boss, right, Brandon?
It's hard to be the boss. Yeah. It's hard to say no. Sometimes it's hard to say yes.
Yeah. Honestly. How many direct reports do you have in your real life job? I forget. Do you have,
I have like four.
Four. Okay. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot of decisions you got to make,
Yeah.
Just measly 2 for me, but combined, Brandon, that's 6. That is almost enough to do us. We could do.
Where do the 421 Patreon supporters sort of sit? Where as far as direct reports go, Josh?
Yeah, exactly. All right. So speaking of Patreon and the regular pod, just a quick kind of roadmap for this week. So today we are doing our Game Week 1 preview. We're going to also look at our squads. So in just a minute here, we're going to share our teams. I think I think I put you first. If you get some cold feet, I'll go first. But we'll share.
I'm not afraid.
Yeah. All right. Good. So we'll share our squads in a second, and then on Thursday we're going to do a kind of. For everybody, we're going to do a last chance pod. I suspect we're going to get even more breaking news and press conferences by Thursday. You and I will probably have made a couple of changes to our team. I mean, I think we made a good faith effort to be ready for today's pod, but of course there's going to be breaking news and transfers. And like I said, if Kieran Trippier suddenly leaves for Saudi Arabia on Tuesday morning, right, that locks in certain spots. I mean, Dominic Solanke went from rumored transfer to part of, on the Twitter feed for Spurs. And what I felt like was like record time, right? Didn't it feel like that came together incredibly quickly?
Yeah. Kudos to the Tottenham social media crew to get the cameras, the lighting, the scripts all ready for the big Dominic Solanke week. Well
done. Yeah. And we'll talk about him more in literally seconds here. And then, so we're going to do that on Thursday, a main feed pod. So 2 pods this week for everybody. And then on Friday, it's going to be our first ever Game Week 1 sort of deadline day, or I don't know Game Week 1 deadline stream. This will be exclusively for our Patreon supporters, and that will start. I think we're going to start that, Brennan, 90 minutes before the deadline. So we'll start at 12 p.m. on Eastern time. So I guess that'll be 5 p.m. in London. And so, we're really excited to do that. And we'll, it'll be a live stream on YouTube. We'll share a link in the Discord and on our Patreon page. So if you want to join that and sort of sweat out with us ahead of the deadline, you can go to patreon.com/alwayscheating to support the pod. But Brandon, should we jump right into in the news, all the news that's happening?
Yeah, I didn't download a breaking news sound effect.
Next time.
Next time. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. By the way, I think are those sound effects just on the YouTube, by the way? And I was looking, I feel like I didn't hear a sound effect on the podcast. That's how, Yeah,
Oh yeah, no,
yeah.
those are on the podcast. I think
Okay.
we can get into the behind the curtain stuff. Nobody really cares, but
right.
there are levers being pulled over here on my end to make the audio pod special for you guys.
I like it because you've always put a lot of thought and love into the audio feed. We still like, again, this is the Always Stream podcast. Podcast still comes first for us, but as we move into the 21st 0.25 century, it's we're starting to do some more video stuff, and so it feels like you've started to kind of slowly embrace that a little bit, and it just took it took a little while for us to get our feet wet a little bit. So anyway, so the Community Shield was on Saturday. I think it was the second year in a row it was on Saturday. I still don't like it. To me, Community Shield should be on Sunday.
Why?
I don't know about this. I don't know. Saturday, it's like you've got a full slate of championship matches. Like, you have real matches that matter, and then you slip in this Community Shield that doesn't. I mean, I don't know. I can never quite get jazzed about the Community Shield as like an actual. It's a friendly, right? And I mean, I know there's like a cup or whatever, but it doesn't, like, I don't know. None of this stuff matters, I guess. But like, I cannot imbue it with meaning, and so it's like, meanwhile, you've got whatever, right? You've got Burnley trying to crawl the way right back up, right? And so that to me is just inherently more interesting than the Shield. Whereas if it's on Sunday, there's maybe one or two championship matches, a little easier for it to.
Okay, all right. Now we will end the segment in which Josh pretends that he was going to watch Burnley on Saturday.
I'm just saying, I'm right.
No, well, I think it was great that they played it on Saturday, because there was something kind of, to me, it was a good sort of like getting my reps in for waking up on Saturday and just watching some Premier League teams play. So it kind of felt like a natural sort of like getting my rhythm set for this coming weekend. I like.
All right, that's true. That is the one thing I think with the like I said, the Olympics have changed our way of watching sports for a couple of weeks here, right? That's sort of, it's like you wake up and it's on, or it's actually been on for, if you're on the East Coast like us, you wake up and it's been on for several hours, right? There's like old and new, you could watch, you could just watch Olympics all day. So probably it was good to get used to that window. So anyway, Garnacho started the match on the bench, came on to score. I had Garnacho in some of my draft teams. I have pulled him since then. And I don't know. I think there's like a reasonable chance that he starts on Friday, but I just don't want to risk it. Like, I just wonder if maybe there's a feeling that he just maybe thrives a little better in a super sub kind of role. And, it just like, I just don't want a player who might only get 30 minutes in my, like, that would kind of ruin Friday for me. Right?
Yes. Yeah. I know. Yeah. You're a low risk game week 1 manager. And I think that's like the most prudent way to go.
Yeah.
I feel like Diallo, who was playing in Garnacho's position. Well, I don't know. Garnacho plays on the left typically.
Yeah.
But it feels like maybe then Rashford. I don't know. I'm very confused as to what Ten Hag is doing with all of his wingers there. But I thought Diallo had some really great moments in the first half, but I expect he's probably not part of the first 11, where I think Garnacho throughout last season proved to be very consistent, very talented young man. I think he starts.
Yeah, but like, would you advise someone bring them in? Okay.
No.
Yeah, exactly. It's do I like him? Yes. Do I want to even? That's the whole point. Is like there's a lot of players that I'm interested in going into game week 1, and I just think. It's part of, like, if you've never listened to this podcast before, right? Make fantasy fun again. It's a huge, the core of this podcast, right? And part of what's fun about fantasy is going into game week 1. Listen, people are going to get benched as the season goes on. There's no getting around it, right? It's Man City, especially, really, especially when the Champions League starts. But going into game week 1, I would ideally have 11 starters. That is something that, call me old fashioned, but that is just, I want to make sure that I have 11 players who start the match.
All right, Grandpa.
I know. And now, because that's a Friday match, we may get some leaks, right? It may be that we get a leak that Garnacho starts ahead of the deadline, in which case, I may have a 6.5 million slot that I could slide him into, right? Like, if I knew for a fact that he was starting on Friday, do I like him more than like in Cuckoo or something like that, right? It's interesting. Like, it's something to think about at least. So Oscar Bob started on the right wing, which I think that we're going to certainly see a lot more Bob now that Alvarez is almost officially official to Atletico Madrid. There was so he gets subbed for KDB right at the end. There's no Foden in the match at all. There's no Bernardo Silva either, right? I mean, I think maybe Silva was maybe he came on.
Silva came on and scored the equalizing goal.
Right, of course. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. I was just thinking about the starting 11. Yeah, so Silva came on and scored. And so there's a lot of competition for the starting spot there. And so it's a little similar to what we were just talking about with Garnacho, where it's just like he seems like a really fun buy, Oscar Bob, and I think he's going to have a good season. I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up with, I don't know, like let's say like 12 total attacking returns, right? Like some combination of goals and assists that equals 12 or more. Like if you had to put the over under on 11.5 for Oscar Bob this season, 11.5 goals and assists, would you go over or under?
I think I'd take the under, but what's interesting about Oscar Bob is are all of those going to come in like the first month of the season?
Right.
Because when like the Bob train started gassing up, I was not really interested. And then the more minutes he's seen, the more offensive productivity he's seen in the preseason, and watching him look really good in the Community Shield, I'm like, I'm kind of into this for the short term. There was an interesting quote on City Extra, like the biggest sort of like local rag for Manchester City, where they report, the plan at Man City this season is for Phil Foden and Bernardo Silva to move inside. Grealish and Doku will compete for a spot on the left, while the competition on the right is between Oscar Bob and Savinho. Again, that's from the City Extra Twitter feed.
Now, to be fair, they have spent 6 years trying to get Phil Foden to play through the middle. Right, that has been an almost,
which is more or less what he did last season.
Did he? I feel like he kind of moved all over the place. I don't know. Yeah, I guess maybe by the end. I feel like he was still on the right quite a lot last season, wasn't he?
Yeah, I guess like central mids like tend to favor one side of the pitch or not, depending on sort of sort of like what their intentions are. But I think that's just food for thought in terms of Oscar Bob. Now at 5 million. How do you view your team structure? Do you think 5 million is too much to pay for a fifth mid? I had Thomas Souček for like more than half of the season at 5 million as my fifth mid last season. It's always kind of like a little more comforting to know. I mean, Souček is not like the ideal fifth mid in terms of getting attacking returns. But it's just good to know that you could have somebody like Oscar Bob instead of Harry Winks at 4.5. This is really nobody at 4.5 that jumps out at me.
Yeah, I have. Who is my 4.5 right now? I guess I'll early reveal. Yeah, it's Harry Winks.
Yeah.
But I mean, I will say, like when it comes to putting my squad together, I don't have the extra 0.5 right now. I feel like if I were to have Oscar Bob, I would have him because I was going to start him.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then I would move the money. I don't know, maybe I'd upgrade my my defense a little bit. That feels like a little bit maybe of a weak spot for me right now. So Phil Foden, by the way, I did look up his trends. By the way, what do you think his like current price is on Transfer Market? Like if Man City were to sell him, what would they sell him for? Presumably
75 million.
150 million. That's higher than I was expecting. That's very high. So, which is, I mean, he's a great player. So, and he's young.
No doubt.
And I think some of that's like how long the current contract is. It also could be that these are like comic book prices. Like, I don't know if you ever had those like comic book guides when you were a kid, and they tell you how much you could sell your.
I know the Kelly Blue Book for your cars.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it's like, but at least those ones are like medium accurate. But I don't know if you ever tried to sell like Spawn issue 1 for the like Wizard.
It's still mint in my garage.
You haven't. It's actually you got it right from the printing press. It's just
100%,
sitting there. Yeah. So last season he played. He was everywhere on the pitch. It's kind of hilarious. He played 21. This is per Transfer Market, which is usually pretty accurate in these things. 21 matches at right. 15 through the middle, 10 through the left, 1 as center forward, and then 4 matches in a more deep line left midfield or right midfield role. So he effectively played in what they consider to be 6 different positions last season. So that's
a midfielder.
He's a midfielder. He's everywhere. Yeah. So it's
he's
like
putting a mid in midfielder.
Yeah, exactly. It's where he started the match, I think is what this refers to. So so predominantly on the right wing, but yeah, you're right. He played more through the middle than I realized last season. Like a good whatever that works out to 30% of the season or so.
Yeah.
All right. So, and he's probably great no matter where he plays. And also, like, again, it's Pep. Like, things are gonna be pretty fluid in terms of how people move around.
Exactly.
All right. So that was more Oscar Bob talk than I was expecting. And so I don't know if we learned too much from this other than the Garnacho thing, making me just feel like you might not be worth the risk, a little bit of starting risk, but again, we might know on Friday. And then Oscar Bob maybe becoming a little more of a viable option, at least to start the season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
All right. So next bit of news is Dominic Solanke official to Spurs, 7.5 million forward. And indicated, I think it was today in an interview, maybe it was yesterday, that he'll start ASAP. He could start as soon as this weekend. They play the late match as well. They play on Monday in game week 1. So kind of even more time for him to get his, sea legs or whatever. So what do you think about the Solanke news?
Well, I find it very exciting. As soon as it was announced, I re-tinkered my FPL team to fit him in. Then I, saw the harsh light of reality, and if looking into my crystal ball, I just see Solanke coming on at the 65th minute in that Monday fixture. Yeah. And that is not necessarily a bad thing. You will remember Kun Aguero's debut for Manchester City in game week 1, came off the bench late in the second half and scored a brace or a goal and an assist. I don't remember exactly. So, I don't necessarily, you don't want to either, Josh. I'm sure preach well, if we have no certainty of a game week 1 start, then he's a total avoid, stay away. Yeah. The thing with Solanke at 7.5 is I feel like you're either in or you're out, because if you're in, then you can structure your team around having presumably Solanke as your third forward. And if you are out, you're building your team around having somebody who's probably not more expensive than Muni's at 6 million in that spot. So to get Solanke for game week 2 is going to be kind of tough without taking a hit. So this is my quandary with Solanke.
I think that's right. And obviously we'll start to see prices rise and fall. I can't remember. In my recollection, they won't happen as soon as this weekend. The prices lock until I think the matches are complete in game week 1, or at least you probably have at least until Sunday, late on Sunday to make, this is between game week 1 and game week 2 to make your changes. So I think the problem, actually the fact that he plays on Monday makes things even a little trickier there. But the problem is if he does anything, he's right. Let's say he scores even a goal in that match. I suspect he's going to be one of the more heavily transferred in players, ahead of game week 2, in which case his price could shoot up 1 or 2. So I'm kind of with you there. I feel like you do need to be with him early because even if you don't kind of build, 7.5 is it's a gettable price. You probably could build in, right? You're okay, I'm going to go with Isak for game week 1 and move him to Solanke in game week 2 or whatever. But again, if he moves even 0.1, then suddenly someone was saying this to me earlier, or someone said this on Twitter. I think it was FPL Salah retweeted this, but I thought it was really insightful, which is that because all of the players at the start of the season are a round number or 0.5, if a player moves even 0.1, they effectively move 0.5 in terms of how they change what you can do, right? And so it really is a rough spot. The comment was basically it was actually about the kind of downside of this, which is that if you get players who are a little punty and they're really popular punts, right? And honestly, Solanke might fall into this category a little bit, but I think that there are a number of players who fit into, and Kuka would be one, right? Where if he blanks in game week 1, you could see a bit, which he probably will, right? I mean, or not probably, but a good chance he will, because they're playing Man City. It's going to be a tough match. So if he blanks in that one, you could see a lot of people sell him right away. And then you could really, if you don't kind of join that sell off right off the bat,
yeah.
you're going to effectively be down 0.5.
Diamond hands with Nkuku. Is that where you want to be?
Yeah, exactly. It's a tricky thing. And so I think that is another reason that if you feel like Solanke is going to work, then, which I actually do. I mean, I'm sort of, I don't know if I actually stated my opinion here, but I love Solanke. Like, I think, he's fantastic. I mean, it was the end of the season before last when I brought him in kind of late, and he was just fantastic for my team. And then last season, I mean, obviously last season everybody had him, right? He had a terrific, especially the second half of the season, he was fantastic. And he's just a very complete player, which I like too. He's he's a traditional like center forward, puts a lot of pressure on the final defender. He's sort of, he's big in the box, like, you can put his head on a cross, like all the kind of traditional stuff, but he's also like pretty unselfish, right? He's a good passer of the ball. It feels like he's going to fit really nicely into this Spurs team. And I think it'll help Son as well. I could see them both being, I don't think it's one or the other. I think that him playing there actually helps Son in the way that having more good players in your squad can actually be very helpful in fantasy sometimes, because it just takes some the attention from the defenders away from other players.
Yeah, John McKenzie, who often does great tactical stuff for The Athletic, was posted a video about Solanke to Spurs and how Ange playing with a forward, if you go back to Ange's Celtic days, was playing with a more traditional, or at least in terms of positionally, number 9. The way like Richarlison doesn't necessarily fit exactly how Ange might want to play. Solanke can press, he is athletic, and he can just be in the box and be fed chances, because what his system is built around is just making chance creation that can be easily replicated, just like a high volume of chances. So
iterative, you might say.
100%. So I mean, you love that for Dom as a fantasy asset, if he just gets to post up in the box and occasionally like drop back, press when they're out of possession. So I'm very excited about what's going to happen there.
I think me too. And we haven't, Ange is not like a heavy rotator either. And so I think there's some value there as well. So I think there's a lot to be excited about with this signing. I'm really apparently it was a it was a transfer. It was like one of those contractual clauses where if the I forget what the term is for that, but basically it was like there was a price, and if they hit that bid, they basically had to negotiate. So it was like 65 million, I think. And so there was really, because my worry for Bournemouth is that it's sort of like when Gylfi Sigurdsson left Swansea and basically went down that season. I was going to say,
where is this story going?
No, it was everything that happened. This is purely a technical discussion, not anything that happens outside off the pitch. But when he left Swansea, it kind of doomed them to relegation, right? Because he was kind of their talismanic player. No, I don't think that's the case with Bournemouth. I think I think Ariel is a good manager. I think they've got a lot of talent there. I actually think it makes Semenyo a really interesting option at 5.5 million. I don't know that he necessarily is going to slot into that forward role without Solanke. He may still play on the right wing, but I do think that he'll be sort of relied on for, but maybe it's like the problem is that it's a little bit of the reverse of what we just mentioned about how Son and Solanke make sense together. Does Semenyo become actually a worse fantasy asset because you don't have all of these defenders kind of focused on Solanke now? So it's tricky.
Yeah, Bournemouth is a complete unknown at this point.
Yeah, I had a Semenyo draft, and then I actually, he dropped out because I just got a little too worried about how it was all going to fit together. And also, they have quite a lot of money now. Like, could they go in for somebody late? Right? Could they bring in a Dominic Calvert-Lewin type, like kind of buy low, see if you can hit like the lottery, right? Like one of these kind of like forwards that hasn't clicked in a few years, right? Like, and sometimes these reclamation projects do kind of work. So I don't know. We'll see what happens there. Other big news, I suppose. I mean, more big news, like in a broad sense, I'm not sure it has that many fantasy implications, but Pedro Neto signed with Chelsea. Just a little surprised by too. Another one that felt like it came together very quickly. 2 goals and 11 assists for Wolves last season. He's a 6.5 million midfielder. There were moments last year where I thought he was absolutely amazing, like absolutely like incredible, right? And just like great. He got injured, unfortunately, right? But there was, he has incredible pace, great passer, can score a little bit. So what do you think about the Neto signing?
Where is he going to play?
Yeah, I mean,
I
they don't really have
it.
So would it be if he starts? Is it Neto on the left, and Cuckoo, in the number 10 role, I guess, and then
no, I think Neto would be on the right where Madueke was playing last season, and then Cole Palmer maybe gets to be a little bit more central.
Right.
But I just smacks of a transfer of like Pedro Neto says, I need to get out of Wolverhampton. Maybe.
Yeah.
I have read nothing really about this transfer, but it sort of goes back to my thinking around Cole Palmer for the start of the season is I'm just totally terrified of the vibes at Chelsea right now and seeing what the new management does and it's how they look. So the Neto gets just immediately put in that bin of just sort of like, I don't know, not going to think about it.
That's, I mean, honestly, I'm kind of there with you. I wouldn't consider him for game week 1. And Cuckoo, I'm still kind of intrigued by, just because it feels like he's been part of every version of Chelsea that we've seen in the preseason. He's been really involved in all the goals as well. And so I think he might be, and he's like a fairly proven asset if you sort of write off last season, right? The kind of injury riddled season. And so,
some incredible post on the Chelsea Instagram today of Nkuku doing attempting a bicycle kick and it gets saved by the keeper, but it was just like a total sort of like bicycle kick thirst trap post, and I'm like, well, this would have been a cool post if he actually scored a goal. But it was saved by the keeper.
You ever seen these TikTok videos where it's like these French guys and they all take turns trying to do like different kinds of trick shots like that? Where it's like they'll be like volley and two touch and it's like 4 dudes. I like it because there's like this big like kind of beefy guy, and you're like, wow, like well done. It's like I don't know. I don't know if it's like a full-time job for these guys or if they just go out every Saturday and do these, but they're great. All right, so a couple other just quick bits of news. Speaking of Chelsea, Jackson and Palmer may not be ready, at least to start for game week 1. That's per Enzo. The Fulkrug signing is official at West Ham. We talked about that one last week, so I don't think we need to go into that. I don't think either of us are considering him for game week 1. We talked about Smith Rowe already. And then one final bit of news, it is Johnstone. Looks like he's set to leave Crystal Palace. Does make Henderson a very interesting option, I think, at 4.5 million. I did put out the call on Twitter a couple of days ago too, and a few people responded. They felt like the Henderson was pretty solidly the starter at 4.5. And so I think that that's an interesting one. I think that we could maybe consider. I think he'd be in my top sort of handful of keepers that I would consider at 4.5. And I'm sort of trying to stick to my guns this year too, and just have a 4.5 and a 4 million and just not rotate at all, because I think I'm just done with the stress of 4.5 rotation. I hate it. And so, and I mean, I think like you can go like, we talked about this in last week's pod a little bit. I think you can go a 5 million and a 4 too. I think that's fine, but just goalkeeper rotation is not what I want to do. And then one final tiny bit of news
before we move on from Crystal Palace and their defense and Mr. Anderson, Henderson, whatever his name is, what is going on with Crystal Palace? Because now all I hear about are, but like they have one of the best center back pairings in the Premier League with Joachim Anderson and Mark Gahey. And now I just hear stories about both of them leaving. Gahey might be going to Newcastle. Now Fulham are trying to pay 20 million to get Anderson to go to Craven Cottage. And you tend to only see these stories if there is some sort of, not necessarily that like Palace is willing to sell, but somebody's putting these stories out there, and I don't think it's Fulham or Newcastle. So I don't really understand how to read that, because on top of all of that, Palace are totally on the up. They finished the season like among the strongest finishes of any team in the division, and now it's sort of like everyone wants to cash in or something like that. It's why wouldn't you want to be a part of what Glasner is doing there? if you're either of them.
I tend to agree. And maybe they all just really loved Michael Elise and they haven't they can't get over him leaving. He was maybe he was the straw that stirred the drink, Brendan. We don't know, right?
Yeah.
So it's it's like Kieran Dewsbury Hall, another player at Chelsea who it's like I don't know how there are a lot of players.
There's nothing that Chelsea transfer department will not touch. It's incredible. So anyway,
it's a lot going on, and maybe it'll all work. Like it looked good at the end of last season, and then they fired Pochettino. So I don't know.
Yeah. So anyway, Dean Henderson, little bit of a question mark for me there, just because what's going on with the defense.
That's fair. And then one final piece of news. I saved this one for last, Brendan, because he's your boy, as everybody knows.
Ooh, who is it?
Yeah, Aaron Wan-Bissaka is moving from Man United to West Ham. I kind of like it. Sure. Kind of fun. I mean, like the thing is he's defensively very solid.
Sure.
He is
great
defensively.
Tackler.
He's a great tackler. I like to call him in my head. I don't think I've actually ever used this, but it's like Aaron slide rule Bissaka, because every cross he does there's never any air. The ball just goes flat on the ground. It's like it's never
shape on that.
Yeah, he never gets one of those like Andy Robertson kind of balloon crosses, right? It's all like
he comes
straight
from the
line.
Anthony Robinson school of crossing. But
exactly.
I do like overall. I think it's a good signing for West Ham, and I feel like they've replenished like way more than I expected them to over the summer. So that's cool.
Yeah. I agree. And he's only 4.5 million. I suspect that both of us will have him in our squads at some point this year. I
double game week fever already setting in.
Yeah, all like two of them. It's gonna be weird. maybe that secret chip that the FPL game has, Brandon. Maybe
it's the Aaron Wan-Bissaka chip.
Yeah, the West Ham chip. It was just 1 week. Everybody has to just field West Ham, and we all just
the West Hammer massive chip.
Yeah, there's just 10 million managers that just go into a game week.
Yeah.
All fielding West Ham's starting 11. And
cool.
That's you can pick your captain though. That'll be the one tweak. So,
that's the out.
Yeah, that'll be the out. All right. So let's get into, I want to do the team reveals. I mentioned Patreon first though, Brandon. Patreon up and running for the new season. We did our first bonus podcast on Thursday. That was a lot of fun. I love the bonus pods, nice loose. We talked about the bonus point system a little bit, ran through some tricky decisions, some of the, like a little more like kind of content from the defender conversation we talked about as well. You get an ad-free podcast feed. You get access to our many we have mini league fever in our Discord this year, but it doesn't feel like there are more mini, and I'm getting tagged in everything. Somehow there's many, and every time I pop in there's 10 new tags telling me who signed up for what.
It's the great. Discord is right now is a little bit like when you're growing up in the neighborhood, like all your buddies would come over and knock on the front door and be like, "Hey Josh, you want to come ride some bikes? You want to go go to the mall?" That's what the Discord is right now. It's everybody knocking on everybody's door, being like, "Hey, let's go play."
Yeah, and who doesn't want that feeling, right? Especially like maybe you're listening to this in I don't know, Twin Falls, Idaho, and you're like, I don't have any other friends
there's nobody
who pay attention. Yeah, exactly. There's nobody for miles. There's no. I don't have a local soccer bar that opens up at 7:30 a.m.
Yep.
Or whatever, I'd be like 5:30, I guess, in Idaho. So I want to join a community of friends. It's international, by the way. I don't want to make it sound like it's when I say soccer in Idaho, Brandon, it does sound
like you really just want the guys from Built to Spill to become Patreon subscribers.
Yeah, is that where they're from? Are they
Twin Falls? They're from Boise boys.
They're Boise boys. Okay,
I don't know if they're from. I don't know what town they're from, but they're definitely Idahoans.
They're very different, Twin Falls and Boise, Brandon. I could get into that in a different. We can do a whole pod on that.
Yeah.
International, we have lots of sort of separate European leagues as well. There's like a Nordic league and there's lots of other stuff going on. So I actually am in big Aussie
contingent there.
Oh, strong Aussie. I joined an Aussies league and a Norwegians league all within like 30 minutes last week. So anyway, you can go to patreon.com/alwayscheating to get access to the bonus pods and our Discord. Lots of other stuff coming as well. But Brandon, do you want to do a quick thank you to our newest patrons?
Yeah, we got a ton of new subscribers. I can't like press my hand clapping. This is your strategy to get me to not play the sound bites.
I wish I was that smart.
Big thank you to new Patreon supporters: Suds FC, Nigel Henzy, also Jack is back as a producer. That's huge, Jack. Awesome. Jira Lilja is in. Joachim Thorgidsen, John Eric Tornsteinsen. Meet Harry. I don't know. We need Sally somewhere on the Discord to complete that one. Also, John Carballo coming in, Jonathan Borders, and Ben Moxham. Big live applause for our new Patreon supporters. Thank you for that. And then, Josh, the last thing we want to do is to thank our partner for this preseason.
Absolutely. We're excited to partner with Fantasy Football Hub again this season. I feel like the big kind of breaking news last week is they got their AI team rater up and running. So lots of people were going into that and having some fun tinkering around. It is fun. And like you can just straight up use it, or you can do it the way I do, which is it's just fun. It's just interesting. Like I have a lot of fun using.
You abuse it. You don't use it. You abuse it.
I abuse it. Exactly. But I think it's fun just to go into these things and just get ideas, right? It just generates ideas. I didn't know that I've ever used one of these things and it spit out an answer and I just did that, right? But you
didn't even look at what player. You just like, cool. Accept all changes.
Yeah, accept all changes. But like, let's say maybe you've got maybe you have a massive PowerPoint that you have to present to your board of directors later this week or something. There's something massive going on.
For a friend, okay?
Yeah, asking for a friend, and you've listened to Always Cheating, but we've been our normal discursive selves and didn't actually get around to answering your question. And so you're like, all right, I just need one quick answer here. You can pop into the hub, use the AI tool, and give you at least a couple of ideas that might be helpful. You can also win your mini league or get your money back. Brandon, that's a fun deal as well.
Absolutely.
And then you get access to Ben Crellin's transfer planner spreadsheet, expert team reveals, tons of team reveals going on right now. I also found their actual team previews to be very helpful. Just even putting together content for this podcast, so that they did a really great job with those. So if you go to fantasyfootballhub.co.uk/always, you can get up to 50% off. It sort of depends on whether you want to do monthly or for a year, but up to 50% off until game week 1. So basically you have a week to get in there and take advantage of that. So fantasyfootballhub.co.uk/always, get in there before game week 1. And I'm certain it'll help you with your game week 1 planning.
Last instruction to our listeners. This is free for you. It's easy for you to do. Join the Always Cheating Super League. It's our free public league where we're like 25,000 managers strong. All of our listeners are there competing for something to get off the Always Cheating shop. The code is QVC0ND. I love that QVC, like we're selling this podcast on TV. QVC0ND, or just go to alwayscheating.com and there's an auto join link right there at the top of the page. So hope to see you there. All right, Josh, let's get into it. I was going to say let's take a break, but we're live on YouTube.
We're just gonna keep talking.
And now this is what we kind of built the whole show around. We're going to take a look at our team. So you kind of like take us into this while I figure out how to share my screen.
Yeah, that sounds good. And can you call it building your whole show around it if you spent 40 minutes not talking about it before you reveal it? It's hard to say. So here we go. You've figured out how to do it, which is great.
I did it.
Yep,
okay.
You did it. So let's. This is dramatic because I haven't actually seen your team. Yeah, you should scroll slowly so I can only see the keepers, and then keep going.
So first thing you'll notice is I have nothing left in my budget, and I've selected 15 of 15 players.
That's excellent. Oh, and I get to actually see your kit. Have you mocked up a kit for yourself as well?
Yeah, my kit. You can scroll. I don't. If I go to my pick my team, there's my kit. No room for racism, and I like to build a little Fulham kit there.
I like it. I went with some Michigan State colors, but it's the same.
So should we look at like how I'm going to line up?
You're right. It doesn't quite work. It works better on the transfer page, but I think you're right. I think it's better to see your lineup instead.
So let's do that.
Stick with this.
All right. So and you can go to youtube.com @alwayscheating to watch us on the screen and see what my team looks like there. But I'll do my best to sort of describe it. I am going, I guess, big in goal with Jordan Pickford, and my logic here is, and there's no rotation. I've got Mr. Bentley from Wolverhampton is just like a nothing backup that I will hopefully never have to use. So Pickford, just the strongest goalkeeper from last season. If you believe that Everton are going to continue their Dyche-like ways and be a little tighter defensively, and Pickford will just be reaping all those shot saves from the low percentage shots that Everton are giving up, that's just kind of my play. Like trying to go for the stronger keeper over saving 0.5. I have not put myself in a position in any of my drafts where I feel like I'm 0.5 short of something I want to do. Typically, if I'm short of something I want to do with the squad, I'm usually like 2 million short of it. So, you know, certainly if you save 0.5, there's a knock-on effect there. But in the defense, I've also chose to spend
in your
more
defense.
in my defense.
Yeah.
So I've got Munoz, Crystal Palace, paying an extra 0.5 there for kind of a mid to upper mid-table team. Munoz?
Munoz, right?
Munoz.
You said Munoz, didn't you?
Okay, who cares? This is not a pronunciation podcast.
I just did that to you. I get so sick of when people do it to us. Sorry.
Yeah. All right. So Munoz, he's there alongside Barco, who we talked about last week in our defensive pod, and he's deputized for Estupiñán's place, but by all Brighton accounts, he's had an incredible preseason. And he is on a lot of set pieces, including corners. And we know that even despite the BPS changes, this is good for him. He will be a chance creator. And at 4 million, there's just like no reason that everyone shouldn't have him in their team. His current ownership is really just 16.1%. So another player that sort of like tells the story that we have to repeat throughout the season of we on this podcast, listening to this podcast, can be in a bit of an echo chamber. You see Barco in every draft, but actually he's in less than 17% of all teams. So you're on board early, and that's great.
Yeah, that's true. I actually don't have him on my team yet. I have been a little worried about whether he's a long-term. I'm probably overthinking it a little bit. I guess I have that like price drop thing in my head where I'm like, if he drops even 0.1, like he'll be my team for 38 weeks, right? Until I wild card.
Okay. But, yeah. I mean, nobody's anticipating him to be dropped from the squad for, a month, 2 months.
Sure.
So,
he's never started a Premier League match. It's just a little bit of like, I don't know, just like a little, tiny hint of anxiety for me about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, someone you would have no anxiety about would be William Saliba, who scored his first preseason goal this weekend. Right. Great way to build ahead of steam heading into that Wolves game. And I think Arsenal are tricky. I think Arsenal are trickier in attacking assets because if you go Haaland, Salah, they're almost impossible to fit into your squad. Maybe Havertz makes an appearance. I just do feel like Arsenal defenders are really important for the long haul, just given the number of clean sheets we expect them to have. And then, as they scored two goals in their friendly this weekend, both scored by center backs. Gabriel also made life even more complicated by scoring. But then Calafiore came on as a second half substitution as the left back. And then as the game went, he moved into the left center back position into Gabriel's spot. So really, even though Gabriel feels like a strong pick still, if you're talking about doubt with Barco,
I'm with you. I have Saliba as well, just for that very reason. There's just three, honestly four if you include Zinchenko, who is a good player. Like in Timber, Zinchenko, Gabriel, and then the newest signing. There's just like Calafiore. There's just a lot of it feels, I don't know, just last year when I started without Gabriel, or when I started with Gabriel over Saliba, it really rocked me, and I just don't want to deal with that again. So yep.
So you'll notice on my bench, I'm kind of going quasi big at the back, where I have two 4.5 defenders on the bench, and it just looks like a very rotatable defense that I built here with Konsa and Anthony Robinson, who I'm currently thinking I'll bench for game week 1, and this just gives me a lot of options game week to game week for a relatively low price. I just couldn't find any Vout Face. I just couldn't stomach actually having him in my team. It's I was talking to our friend Pat Riley, not the Lakers coach, the other Pat Riley, the other day, and he was just like, he's caught some of Leicester's preseason. He's like, they're like Sheffield United bad, it appears.
I think they have the highest they're the bookies' favorites to get relegated.
So that's the thinking. Going on to the midfield, I'll read these 5 across. I'm looking to go with a 3-5-2 into game week 1 with Anthony Gordon, Emil Smith-Rowe, Oscar Bob, and because man, just like I don't know, there are no City guys who are really sort of like speaking to me right now.
Yeah.
And then I got 2 Liverpool guys. So Mo Salah, captain for game week 1, and then Diogo Jota, who I would put like on very equal footing with Luis Diaz for that spot. And there's something about this Diego Jota spot in the squad at 7.5. You know, Fabrizio Eze, another very appealing pick in that price bracket at 7 million. He was in my team for a while, and I was just kind of thinking, why double Crystal Palace with Munoz and Eze? Why not double Liverpool, especially with them having Ipswich in their first match? So it just kind of like this switch flipped, and I'm like, I'm going double Liverpool in the midfield.
I mean, and he scored today, or was it yesterday? This weekend anyway. I think the problem with him always is can we trust him to stay healthy for longer than 45 minutes at a time, right? But when he plays, he scores, and so it's like he's a real I would say of your starters here, he's the most kind of high. Well, Oscar Bob maybe too, actually. So you've got a couple high risk, high reward options in here. I actually think it'd be interesting when we show my team. I think I've vied for or I've opted for a little more like I've hedged my risk a little like I'd say my team is a little safer than yours in general at the moment. But let's see the rest of the
round out the front 3. We've got Isak, of course, who is just really having a strong preseason, though he did miss a pen, but happens to the best of us.
He's got a great price, right, at 8.5 million, and he plays Southampton at home in game week 1. I honestly think he is I think a top 3 captain pick for game week 1, right? I'd go Salah, Haaland, that's close. I'd probably still opt for Haaland myself, but I think it's very close between those two. And just because Haaland is such a goal bot, but Haaland, Salah 1 and 2, and then Isak like right on their heels in terms of
right. So I have Haaland as well, and then my third forward is João Pedro, who is marginal risk, though Brighton fans would suggest that he's going to start. And so here is like going back to that Dominic Solanke discussion of Pedro becomes Solanke, and then suddenly I'm getting rid of Diogo Jota, and I'm downgrading him to.
There's a lot of people in that 6.5 million range, though.
There are. So for now, I'm kind of content to look at this as a 3-5-2 setup. But I am very Solanke curious at the moment. And
Solanke pilled, you might say.
I'm Solanke pilled. Guardiola would be the other player that has been in a lot of my drafts that hasn't survived to this point. And judging Man City's performance in the Community Shield, it's just like really sluggish, it felt like. And certainly that changes when they get like a full strength 11. A lot of youngsters in that starting 11. But
I love him for game week 2. And game week 1 is kind of like if you have him, you should just start him because he's good enough to start every match. But I agree. I don't know that I see a lot in that one. But I think game week 2, when they host Ipswich, that'd be the one where you'd really want to have him. And that's actually that I think that's really the argument for Bob as well, Oscar Bob. And I haven't really I've gone back and forth on Bob a little bit. I think this goes back a few podcasts ago, but when I saw Man City play in person at Yankee Stadium a few weeks ago, he was the player that I thought was like the best player on the pitch. Like I thought he was fantastic, right? And he was playing similar right-sided spot, in the match where we expect him to start the season at. So, I think he's a real he's obviously like a risk just because KD, if KDB and Foden both start. you could see, you could see him maybe getting forced out of that 11. Sort of depends on where everybody lines up, right?
Mm-hmm.
But or even if he wants to opt for a more sensible, I mean, Bernardo Silva, right, would be another player who could play on the right-sided spot. He's done that plenty, in the past. So
absolutely,
yep.
Yeah. Our friend Alexander in the chat wants to know why start Oscar Bob over Pedro for game week 1, and that's like a total fantasy play of I'm starting Pickford in goal and.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just I'm gonna hope for a 0-0 draw with a Barco and a Pickford clean sheet to boot. So that means, and I generally don't like to play that negative risk sort of a style, but just like the whole conversation as you were just articulating around Oscar Bob is if you're going to take a punt on this guy, in order to get fun, fun that you're promised to get by getting Oscar Bob in is only going to come from having him on the pitch in your fantasy squad.
That's true. This is a very make fantasy fun again squad here, I will say, and I think. And then on your bench, can you pull up one more time?
Sure.
So I think, and then the two defenders that you have there, you've got Konsa and you have Robinson, right?
Yes, that's right. So
yep.
Aston Villa, they feel like kind of like haven't fully reconstituted in the preseason. Ollie Watkins hasn't seen many minutes. And and the thinking with Konsa is that he might actually move out to right wing or right fullback and be a little bit more involved in the attack there. Now, I don't know. I wonder about. He's done that for England. He's done that occasionally for Villa.
I love Konsa. I've got him in my squad as well, though. Okay. Same. I don't even, whether the right back thing happens or not. Right. I just feel like there's. He's just a very solid player, and they have a really solid. They're a well-coached team that's really strong defensively, and you can get one of their players for 4.5 million. They're a Champions League squad, right? Like they're like super. Like it's actually like we don't kind of think of them that way because we can't reorient our brains around that still. But you don't typically get 4.5 million, even center backs. You don't get them for 4.5 million on Champions League level squads, right? So I think he's a good buy.
Yeah, and Robinson is just an elite left back. You'd like a little bit more attacking output from him. I think where Aaron Wan-Bissaka's, crossing skill has completely stalled. Robinson continues to improve, and he already linked up with Smith Rowe for a goal this preseason. So he just seems like a fun guy to have too at 4.5.
I like him too. He's one of the. There actually are quite a number of 4.5 million defenders to sort of kick around, and I think that you have multiple of them in your squad. Although Munoz is 5 million, right? But you have but Robinson, Konsa. I think I have at least one different one in mind too. So I can share my squad now too, I think it'll be interesting actually because I didn't do this intentionally, but a lot of the players that you were saying that you kind of wish you had in your squad are in my squad. And so this is going to be a real, I'm going to test your, resolve here.
FOMO.
I'm going to test your FOMO and obviously it's Sunday night, right? Like by the time Friday rolls around, we'll have made some changes, and that's just how it's going to go. And we're going to be doing a pod and a deadline day recording. So there's lots of chances to.
The likeliest thing before I see your team is that I'll have Solanke going into game week 1, I think. But let's see what you got here.
Okay. So this is my squad. I do have Solanke, and I will run through the squad. I'll start at the top here. So I have gone with the single keeper system, Brandon. It's like the single payer model. Sure. I think it's many have tried it, and a cheap single keeper option, Brandon. That's what America wants and needs.
Yeah.
And so that's
what I don't want to think about it. I just want to know that I have it whenever I walk into the emergency room.
Yeah, exactly. The taxpayers would love it once they had it. They just don't know it. And so so I've got Flecken up front, and then I've gone with Valdemarson as my keeper, and I just literally went with him because he is the backup to Flecken. And I was like, well, if Flecken gets
logic,
if he gets COVID in the next 5 days, at least I've got a backup keeper ready. So I've got I thought he played quite a bit better at the end of last season. It's kind of funny because Flecken really kind of basically screwed my team my first wild card last year. But I'm going to let bygones be bygones, Brandon, and start fresh here. To the back, I've got, we talked about Dan Burn at the start of the pod. I would say of my 11, he's one that I could see myself changing. I just want a little more clarity on what's going to happen at Newcastle and who we think the projected starters are. I think as long as there's no news on Gahey, I think that Burn is fine. And even if there is, I think he could play over Lewis Hall anyway. There's basically two spots where you could play Dan Burn, and it just seems like Eddie Howe really trusts him, right? He just seems to really like rely on him in his 11. And maybe it's because he's so tall. I don't know. I don't know how much the height is a factor here. Yeah. And then I do have Gavardiol. And as you'll see, the biggest difference between our squads really is that you have Salah and I don't, right? And if you don't have Salah, it gives you 2.5 million extra, and you can sort of spread it across your team more. And I'm not saying that I'm certain that this is the best way to go, but I do like the way it looks in my squad. And so I've got Gavardiol, who I just think is a terrific, like, emerging fantasy superstar. And 6 million, I think it's a reasonable price. Saliba, same rationale as you. I've gone with Luis Diaz mostly because it was that kind of risk thing that we were talking about before. I just don't enjoy having Jota. He gets injured so much, and it feels like that's like a transfer waiting to happen, if I bring him in. And so I just don't want to deal with it. And Son is, he's had a great preseason. And I just basically see him as kind of my Salah alternative. They also play a promoted team in Gameweek 1. And I just think there could be kind of a buzz around that club now that they've made this really affirmative move to bring in Solanke. And it just feels like that attack could be awesome. And they're playing a Leicester team that's all, as you were saying, like, that looks terrible. And they're now down Vardy and Patson Daka got injured as well. So they have no forwards. It's like it's a mess. And so and we love our Leicester supporters, Brandon, but
do we need Pedro Porro in our teams? What's going on there?
I mean, maybe, what is he 5.5? I wish he was 5. I mean, he should be 5.5, I guess, but it's annoying. It's like, they're going to concede a bunch of goals, right? And so it's going to be super annoying to have him. I've got Nkunku mostly because I've just been moving around. I actually, the Nkunku spot has been a lot of different players over the last couple of days. Emile Smith-Rowe, Semenyo, and Nkunku. The advantage of Smith-Rowe and Semenyo is that they're both $1 million cheaper. And so that would give me some savings if I decide I really need to have Salah, for example, right? Like, it gives me a little more flexibility. So I'm not as certain about Nkunku.
What do you expect to get out of Nkunku? It's
just a bank on his talent, basically, in the sense that, I mean, he's 6.5 million. It's just like, I just feel like you're getting a premium player for nothing, right? And I think there's a reasonable chance that he could actually play out of position as a forward as well. And so I think I just think you're going to get a lot of minutes out of him. I think he's going to be the kind of focus of that Chelsea team, and so that's really what it is. But I don't know. It's a bit of a preseason buy, I have to say, just because he looks so good in preseason. But I think that it's that is maybe one of the weaker spots in my 11, and I think I just really got to think it through a little bit. It could be that especially because I played Man City in Gameweek 1, I'm not like, I don't feel especially compelled to not make a transfer going into Gameweek 2, right? Like, I know some people just like they want to start kind of saving transfers right away, right? And sort of like give themselves like a lot of flexibility. If I brought in somebody who was cheaper or the same price, and I kind of moved to Nkunku, it's or whatever, right? Like, I think that spot could be one where I move my players around a little bit. Just again, this is a little bit like Munoz for you, where I just see it as an investment in a squad that I feel like is on the up. I think 7 million is a reasonable price for him. I really do see him as the kind of talismanic option for Crystal Palace. And without Elise there too, I think he's got a lot of potential to really be kind of the man in that side. I think the risk there is he's a little bit like Jota, where he gets a lot of great attacking returns when he's healthy and plays, right? And he's kind of struggled.
Nkunku is, got to be on the injury suspicion list. as well, right?
Oh, you're really coming at me with this.
Well,
Cuckoo one.
I sat through you talking about Jota for 5 minutes and his injury record.
30 seconds, maybe. Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, so there are some injury, doubts there. And then up front, it's Isak and Holland, like you, and then Solanke, who I suppose it's a little bit of a punt, but it feels like they're taking a while to move these players over, by the way. He's still got his Bournemouth kit on, but he'll, of course, be playing Leicester away in that match. So, so I just really, I like this 11. I think, again, and Cuckoo could turn into somebody else, but I really like the back four, especially for game week 1. I like what's up front. I mean, the only thing that's missing is Salah, right? And other than that, I like it quite a lot. And then in terms of my bench, Harry Winks, just a cheapie fifth midfielder. Who hopefully won't come on and play, right? And if he does, exactly. But who knows? I mean, they're playing Spurs. Leicester probably scored 2 goals in this match. And then I do have, like you, I'll actually probably swap these guys in my 11. But I've got Wout Faes, who's just basically, I just wanted a real like a 4 million guy that I could just stick at the end of my bench, right? And he makes everything else work because I don't have enough money to go any higher there. And then Ezri Konsa, like you talked about the rationale for that. I think that one makes sense. So I probably will swap Konsa and Face and have Konsa as my first bench defender. But so that's how it's looking right now. I like the balance quite a lot. And again, it's kind of like I think you zeroed in on the big questions. Actually, there's 2 questions. One is Diaz, or if I moved in Cuckoo to someone like Smith Rowe, I could move Diaz to Odegaard, right? And then I would have an Arsenal asset. And that is the one other problem. I know you have this in your squad as well, but I just don't. It's like there's something about getting Odegaard where it's like I don't really want him, but he feels like the best option on Arsenal that I could afford, right? And it's like I don't really like to like Diaz. I'm kind of excited about, right? He had an amazing summer. It's like it feels like this could be like a fresh start for him at Liverpool.
Did you ever have this situation with, say, like your dad, where you're in the car, it's just you and your dad, and you just always get this impression that your dad kind of hates the car that he's driving, that he's been driving for like 5 years. And the car has worked. It's gotten you to school every day. But your dad hates that car because he went to the dealership and he wanted certain bells and whistles, but he couldn't. It didn't work in his budget.
Right.
So he ended up with this car that was perfectly good, but it does not bring him any joy. And whenever he sees it, he thinks about how he doesn't have Bukayo Saka in his team. And Odegaard is that car.
Yeah, I know. And that was when they were the same price. It was kind of, were they $500,000 separated last year? But Saka now is at a massive price, right? It's pretty hard to get him in. Now, the other thing that you and I don't have, I mean, again, it's like I felt great about this team until I started poking holes in it myself. But neither of us have Cole Palmer, right? And that is a bit of a concern, given that he was absolutely amazing last year. And I think he just follows much like Ollie Watkins, another player that you and I don't have. I mean, you start playing this game, and the problem is that you only have so much money, right? It's like if budget were no question, then you could just have a very amazing player and that'd be it, right? You got to make some sacrifices. But Watkins and Palmer are, and I guess Saka to a smaller degree, are all in that coming back late from Europe, a little bit of a doubt. I would say of my squad, the only, I guess you've got a couple. I mean, Saliba's fine because he's a center back. Gvardiol should be fine. I mean, he just started the community shield. Diaz, maybe he's a little bit of a risk, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't think he's a risk to start necessarily.
No, he's not a risk.
Yeah. And so, and so I think that's the question is just, how much are you worried about minutes for Palmer? Even, Anthony Gordon, there was a little thing, how was like, we plan to take him off early this weekend because we're still kind of getting him back into the rotation. How made it seem like he'll be fine for this weekend.
How is an insane person. So
that's true. You can't really trust him.
I would not listen to a single word.
Yeah, that's true. You can't really trust How too much. So that's where I am with my squad. Any thoughts, questions, or shall I just
talk to me a little bit more about Flecken, because you kind of glossed over that. Like, why Flecken over any other 4.5 goalkeeper, be it Dean Henderson or I don't know, who are the other options there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's Flecken, Henderson. Who are some other like 4.5s that
There's
I was
Jose Sa, but nobody's getting any Wolves assets at all.
Yeah.
I guess just more bluntly, like, why Flecken, and what kind of expectation do you have of the Brentford defense? And the goalkeepers are kind of interesting because it's not necessarily, when you go 4.5, built around they're going to get a bunch of clean sheets, but Flecken being a shot stopper, etc. So what do you think there?
So I think, lots of saves. I mean, it's a mix of good home matches, right? Which are, so like clean sheet opportunities, right? Palace, Southampton, West Ham, Wolves, all at home in the first 7, along with difficult away matches where you could see him racking up 3 points, right? And Liverpool, Man City, Spurs away. So those are kind of like a good sweet spot in some ways, right? Like what you almost don't want are like mid-table away matches for these kinds of keepers, right? Those are the ones where they get 2 points or 1 or whatever. And so I think I'm sort of kicking around him. I think I had Henderson, and then I moved over to Flecken. Flecken's a little bit of a bot pick too. Like he's sort of like the preferred 4.5 million keeper for the models, right? And so that's like another. So it's again, it's not. I'm not making my picks based on this, but it's a consideration. Chelsea, to me, there's just too much keeper doubt, right? They keep like they did. They bought another keeper, and then they also there's like another keeper they're in for who might join in January or something. Like there's like it's endless. It's like endless keepers, right? And so, Brighton, you've got the same thing where like Verbruggen should be fine, but like there's a little bit of a risk there, right? Just because Kelly Steele is still there as well. And so you can kind of like Areola. I just don't trust West Ham, right? Maybe I feel a little bit better about him now that with Wan-Bissaka joining, that actually probably does make them stronger defensively, although I'm not sure he'll start right off the bat. And so, it's like he just sort of, it basically comes down to him or Henderson, I think, as the kind of 2 4.5s that I'd consider. And I'm honestly just a little on the fence between those two. I think maybe
I wonder sort of if you want just something, a food for thought is maybe Dean Henderson in your draft, because you can then sort of cover Munoz if he scores points for his ownership.
Yeah. I mean, that's a consideration too. I mean, it's a nice run for Palace to start the season as well, right? It's it's a little better than Brentford, than Brentford. Brentford, West Ham, away to Chelsea, but then a couple of home matches. I mean, actually, I don't know. I mean, they play away to Chelsea, they play Liverpool, they play Man United. It's I don't know. It's always going to be tricky to find that keeper that has like that kind of miracle run. I think if I had an extra 0.5, I would probably do the same as you and just get Pickford. And maybe by the time Friday rolls around, I do have Pickford. But at the moment, I'm just so sick of even trying to solve the keeper puzzle. Right. It's like year after year after year, I try to rotate keepers, or I'm like, oh, this year I'm going to go more expensive and that's going to solve it. Right. And it's just like, and I'm just like, what if I just spent nothing on my keepers and just, and just picked one? Oh, wow. Cat appearance on the
YouTube viewers.
Yeah. So that's really the rationale, is like, I honestly just don't want to think about it too much. And I'm just like, just give me one. Right. It's not a spot where I expect because I just feel like it's very unpredictable with keepers, right? It's like the best returns you get from keepers sometimes are in these away matches where it's like they'll play away to Liverpool, and this some keeper will have this match where he concedes 5 goals, but then they stop a Salah pen or whatever, right? And they get 6 points from it. They have actually reduced the number of bonus points you get for a pen save. I'm not really sure why. I guess because VAR leads to more pens or something, but so maybe that makes the 4.5s a little less valuable. I don't know. I mean, does that rationale even? I don't really know. I mean, it's like are cheaper keepers, because they tend to be on worse teams, are they more likely to concede penalties? Probably, right? I mean, worse teams probably concede penalties more. So
and it seems like the good teams always have like terrible pen stoppers like Ederson, not known for his penalty saving abilities, et cetera, because they need, for their systems, they want ball playing keepers, and there's less of an emphasis on shot stopping ability.
Yeah.
Which makes Allison like this like miracle of a person. But anyway.
So that's where I am. And let's talk a little bit about game week 1, Brandon. We kind of already have, obviously, but game week 1 kicks off on Friday. We have a nice 4-day slate of matches. You have Man United hosting Fulham. Early match, Liverpool on Saturday at Ipswich. I think that'd be a really fun atmosphere, really cool match.
Can you get the fixtures up on the screen? That would be so cool.
What a great idea.
Yeah. Totally blow your flow here. But I just to vamp while you do that, am very excited about Friday. Here on the East Coast in North America, it's like perfect. Take a half day of work, and it's just going to be party time. And there's something about this Fulham or this Manchester United Fulham match that feels like appropriate stakes. It's a match for pride and bragging rights, more than it is about table position. I don't know. Would you predict Manchester United are going to finish in the top 6 this season?
Top 6? I don't know. I think there's a lot of competition for top 6. I think,
boy, howdy, is there? Yeah.
I mean, well, I don't want to. Listen, there's more Man United supporters out there than
we love them all.
Shake a stick at.
We love Manchester United.
So I don't want to come out here and start talking anything about Man United at this point. But I think it's going to be, I would say, Europa League kind of 7th, 5th, 6th, 7th, somewhere in that range would be what I would expect.
Yeah, similarly. Heck, Fulham fans just riding high on this Emile Smith-Rowe transfer that might actually just be like a total dud. Who knows? We'll see. But some of us might say, hey, we'll finish above Manchester United this season. How's that to stir the drink?
I love it. Stir away, Brandon. Mm-hmm. So I think that match will be a lot of fun. And then we got a full slate on Saturday. Ipswich hosts Liverpool. They've got Arsenal play. They host Wolves. Everton hosts Brighton. Newcastle, so Southampton. Forest Bournemouth, which is like a real, like a pure watchish. Like now that Solanke's gone, it's like not a ton of. Although honestly, Morgan Gibbs-White is like one of the most underrated fantasy players out there. Like just consistently returns. I think we said this when we did our midfield pod. He's just like $500,000 too expensive. Like if you were exactly 6 million, I think like you could you could make a great case. If you were 6 million, I think I would actually have him going into game week 1. That would like if I had him over in Cuckoo, that turns right. That suddenly I own Pickford as well, right? That gives me an extra 0.5. So it's something to think about. It's one of those makes you think. And then the late game on Saturday is West Ham Villa. And I think that'll be an interesting match too. Obviously West Ham have a new manager, and I suspect that Ollie Watkins will come right in and start. I'd be a little surprised. What do you think about Morgan Rogers, by the way? Heavily debated player. I mean, good chance he starts in the number 10 role. Is it just that there's a little too much risk there? It's like it feels like one risk too many for me in my squad. If I'm going to have, it's like if I have Diaz and Nkuku and Morgan Rogers, that's like there's like one punt too many, right? It's like I don't know. If you're gonna have Morgan Rogers, you need to have a bunch of solid players around him.
Well, yeah, you start to get into that dangerous territory of price tag sort of is equal to the quality of the player, and I don't think we necessarily believe that, but it just kind of starts to look weird of like, wow, I'm starting 2 5 million midfielders, and maybe that somehow, because your brain gets all messed up with the price tags, you feel like you're not putting your best foot forward. But there is something about what's going to happen with that Villa squad when they actually do get more into the transfer market. Is Rodgers like going to immediately be a sell? But I've made a similar case for Oscar Bob as you would with Rodgers. Like they're the same fantasy asset for all intents and purposes. Either you've got Bob or Rodgers. I think having one of them is probably like having one of them as your fifth mid feels like the right strategy to me.
Yeah, fifth or fourth. Yeah, I mean, you're well. It really depends on how you're lining up too, right? Like if you're doing this João Pedro thing, where you're kind of rotating, right? Like you're like where you're rotating between Pedro and your fifth mid. I think that matters more, right? If you're going with like a 3-4-3 formation, then I don't like it as much, just because I don't think I'm going to play my fifth mid very often.
Right. But wouldn't you rather have somebody like Rodgers than Harry Winks?
Not if it meant I made my starting 11 weaker, right? Like, so no, I guess not, but I do understand what you're saying. Like it feels like you're kind of like it's like buying like a lotto ticket or something, right? It's like Bob or
Rodgers.
Where Rodgers are both kind of in that like lotto ticket camp where it's like, maybe they'll blank 4 matches in a row, or maybe they'll get double-digit returns the first 2 game weeks. And
both kind of have first names for last names, Bob and Roger.
Yeah, that's true. It's a weird, it is like Rogers Hornsby, the great.
About to get into numerology corner here if we're not careful.
Exactly. And then on Sunday we've got Brentford hosting Palace, Chelsea, Man City. Obviously the marquee match of the weekend. Although, as you said, goodness knows what version of Chelsea we'll have. I have to say, I mean, I know I don't want to now. I don't want to like move away from it because it seems like you were on me too much. But I would say I don't love having Nkunku for this match. It does not feel like the kind of ideal. Like I wonder if I would rather transfer him in game week 2 or 3 or something like that. I don't know. I'm still a little on the fence about him, but
sure.
Yeah, you and I saw Chelsea Man City last year. It was an amazing match.
One of the best games of the season for sure. And Nkunku didn't feature at all, strangely.
Cole Palmer did. That's for sure.
He did. I mean, honestly, like good luck to Chelsea fans. Maybe this will be like a huge marquee result for your new manager and your club. You're playing at the Bridge. The Bridge is, support comes out in force there.
Yep.
But just the Nkunku of it all, it does feel like a squad that, if we're generous, it could come together very quickly. Yeah. But this feels like the perfect match to just kind of sit on the sidelines with Chelsea as a fantasy manager and like, okay, show me what you got. Is this going to be interesting? Is this going to be exciting? Then I will spend a transfer on you 1 or 2 or 3 game weeks down the road. Because the fixtures actually do get quite a bit better after game week 1.
Yeah, I was going to say there is a possible strategy of, like at least with a squad like mine, if you had Son, it would be to just because there's a little bit of risk about. I mean, I don't know, because they play Man City. I actually think Palmer's probably going to start, but whether he's ready for a full 90, or whether he's even going to be at his best, right, for a full 90 is a question mark. But like in my squad, if I moved Nkunku to a 5.5 million player, let's say I went for like a Semenyo or Oscar Bob, right, like some punt there, that would give me an extra $1 million in my squad. I could turn a 4.5 million keeper into like a Pickford, and then it would leave me 0.5 million in the bank, and that 0.5 could move Son to Palmer at some point over the next couple of weeks, right? And so that might be honestly like one strategy to consider as well. I suppose for you, it's a little easier. You can just go solid to Palmer at some point if you want to.
Yes, yeah. Though I hadn't really given that much thought, because the thing about Salah, which is in some ways off-putting, is you're just kind of buying him for the season. You're kind of like, yep, I still believe in you, man, and let's ride again. Because I've not given any thought to like the rotation, the movement, who comes in for Salah. But you just made me feel a lot better about it. I'll tell you that much.
Well, there you go. I mean, Palmer might be a great fit down the line. I mean, obviously Salah's going to be great. I don't know. It's just
he leaves you with options, though. It's true with Salah.
And
a lot of options.
And I think it would be less like that. You like it's more about whether it's sustainable to have Haaland too. Like you and I are sort of like have just given ourselves over to having Haaland, I think. But at 15 million, it just takes a massive bite out of your budget, right? And so every other player starts to feel like someone you're wedging into your squad as a result.
I was giving some thought to this. Our friend Bronwyn reached out to us on our Instagram for a little advice on Holland, and I was thinking about his budget at 15 million, and I don't think most managers think about it like this. They that like it takes more skill to manage a team that doesn't have Holland in it. But in a way, because he costs so much, it takes just as much skill to manage a team with Holland in it, because you've got so little budget to work with after you get him. I think most people think about it in terms of just like, I want different and more players, and that's how I want to do it. It's not sort of like I'm better or worse at the game. But how I just feel like sometimes we're not thinking about Holland in enough in as many dimensions as it's worth thinking about him in.
Yes, I think that's, I mean, I don't know. It's just like, when it comes down to it, he's just like, he is a threat to score a hat trick in virtually every single match that he plays. Right. And that's even more than no, granted. I mean, like, you have Salah captain this week. I don't think you have to have Captain Holland every single week.
Yeah. But, at least 2 game weeks a month, you're going to easily get away with not having Holland. The question then becomes, those other 2 game weeks. Is your rank just going to get absolutely cratered?
Especially with Alvarez leaving as well. It really means that they effectively have one forward. Now, of course, they can play Foden and other people. Bob, I think, honestly, they could play up front as well. But we
talked so much about Bob today.
We have talked a lot about Oscar Bob. It's weird. The Oscar, you've got to use him for the image for this week's pod. When you make your graphic. All right, so that's a couple quick questions. One is captain picks. I think we covered that already. I think it's personally, although I think it's like 1 and 1A. Holland, Salah, Isak would be the big 3. If you look beyond those 3, I mean, then you're kind of in punt territory, right? I think it's like Jota, I think would be a decent pick. Son is probably really underrated as a captain pick, given that they're playing a Leicester team that are pretty banged up going into game week 1.
Yeah. What about Arsenal? I think Arsenal should have a field day against Wolves here.
Yeah, that's true. So I think Saka is just, he's like Palmer, just he's like in that late arriver camp. It's like Watkins. So I just don't like him as much as a captain pick.
Yep.
So MJ asked about some riskier fun / gamble picks to consider. I was just, it's kind of running through different options. I do think that the Liverpool midfielders that you and I talked about, I think Diaz and Jota are both really fun picks to have. I don't think either of them are going to be hugely owned going into game week 1. And so I think those are a lot of fun. If you're going even further off the board, then I'll let you pick a couple here. I think Dwight McNeil for Everton is kind of a fun pick. He's super. Yeah.
Did not expect that.
No, I'm not going to. Listen, you can go with some very conventional picks when it's you. Okay. I'm trying to think of some very rando picks that might be worth considering. And it's a Brighton team that's like under construction, right? New manager, a lot of returning from injury players. And so I think
love Dwight McNeil so much.
I always have. He's always been one of my favorites. So I think Dwight McNeil is a kind of fun out there pick. So what about you? Who are some fun, riskier picks?
Well, fun. I think you go day of the week there too. So why not a Friday captaincy? There are some managers who are like, screw it, I'm going to play a chip in game week 1 and I'll get a jump start on the field. So I was like, the Olympics always reminds me of like all the strategy that's involved in track and field and swimming. It's not necessarily who's the fastest. It's like who can have the best race. And there are people who like to lead from the front, and some people who just want to be in the pack. And maybe if you want to lead from the front, you could just take a punt on if you think Manchester United are going to get a result here, go Bruno Fernandes. If you think Fulham are a tasty little underdog, then hey, Emile Smith-Rowe, it's a party with him right now in fantasy. Let's enjoy it. And then on the other hand, it is Spurs on Monday. Kulusevski coming into some good form. Does he get one of his final starts before the whole reign of Solanke
I don't
begins?
think so.
And,
maybe.
Just to be, let's see who else in Spurs, like Brennan Johnson.
Yep, Johnson. Yeah, I mean Kulusevski. Yeah, like because he was playing out of position. Does he bounce Brennan Johnson out? I mean, Johnson had kind of won that spot over him, though, right? So it's hard to say between those two. Yeah, I think. What about? Here's one. Here's like a fun rando pick if you want to just go out there. Fulkrug. New West Ham signing. If you want a totally different forward, actually, you know what? I'm gonna change this, Brendan. He's gonna be my ex dog in him pick of the week. Okay, who's got that dog in him, Brandon? For me, it's Nicholas Fulkrug, new signing. Yeah, he's got that. The 31-year-old's he's still got that dog in him.
I'm gonna go Anthony Gordon for my ex dog of the week. Okay. He always gets points at home, and even though Eddie Howe's trying to throw us off that scent, this dog hunts, Josh, and I think Isak and Gordon are going to take it to Southampton at home on Saturday.
Okay, so that dog does hunt. I like it. All right, well, that is it. We're back on Thursday. We'll have lots more to talk about, I am certain. Thanks everyone for listening, and hope you enjoyed those team reveals. And we have some questions. We'll talk. We had some listener questions that I'm going to move to Thursday, Brandon. So let's just go ahead and remind people once again, they can support the podcast on Patreon. You go to patreon.com/alwayscheating. And Brandon, do you want to thank our producer patrons?
Absolutely. Big thanks to producers Mike DePietro, Trevor Ingerson, Dave Wagner, Lloyd, our buddy Chris Howell, Andy Penn, Nick Wright, Lazarus Janos, Jesse Halstead, Bruce Kerr, Brian Chin, Babas Kuhn, Rom Frost, Blair Jacobson, Todd Byerly, Andy Portlock, Dan Parsons, Terrence O'Donnell, Kerry Swanson, Jefferson Turner, Easy Does It, Eze Does It, I should say, Francis Moore, Sam Shower, Craig Jackson, Caleb Robbie, Brian Clark, Thomas Tislov, Fro Jacobson, The Saint, Gareth H., Shalin F. Kadakia, Rishi, Nigam, Noah and Louise, Travis Grant, Linus Vennerstrom, Matthew Skinner, Ben Coombs, Eric Kite, Rune Sandberg, James Murray Wood, James C., James Holland. Wow, it's triple James.
Yeah.
Followed by Jack. A great Robin Williams movie. Just became our latest podcast producer. Thanks, Jack. Rate, review, subscribe, of course, in this final game week as we push to the game week 1 deadline. It's a huge help to the Always Cheating podcast. If you want to share the pod with your friends, post on social media about us, give us a rating. It's really useful. Or follow us wherever you get social media. We're most active on Twitter at Hail Cheaters, and our website where you can again get that Super League code. It's alwayscheating.com.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. We'll see you on Thursday. Bye.